a path both bold and true. Like Solomon and David, his strength will see it through. He loves and leads with honor, his family by his side, providing for his household with virtue as his guide. A man of options cares for his wives, raising big families where love thrives. Blessed by God Almighty, steadfast and strong, a righteous man who builds where he belongs. Through every storm and trial, he holds the line with grace. A patriarch who stands to guard his sacred space. The world may cast its judgment, options plants the seeds where legacies will grow. A man of options cares for his wives, raising big families where love thrives. Blessed by God Almighty, steadfast and strong, a righteous man who builds where he belongs. Through every storm and trial, he holds the line with grace. A patriarch who stands to guard his sacred space. The world may cast its judgment, but truth will always show. A man of options plants the seeds where legacies will grow. A man of options, living the ancient way, with love and honor guiding every day.
Wow. How about that for an intro? What do you guys think about that? Oh, we lost Brian. Anyway.
Wow. That was cool. That was cool.
Freaking done. How do y'all like our new intro? Give us a little thumbs up or heart if you think it's cool. If you don't like it, you can tell us that too. Welcome everyone to the Man of Options podcast, episode 2. This is an open discussion where Christians challenge false doctrines on monogamy-only marriage, reclaiming masculine roles, and countering feminist brainwashing, and restoring God's families. So welcome, everyone. I'm your host, or one of your hosts, Rob Kowalski, and these are my co-hosts. This is Sir Aubrey Killian and Jeff V. We just lost Ryan. I'm sure he'll be right back with us. But thank you for tuning in. We're going to set to get into a juicy discussion here. This will be about an hour long. And we're glad you joined us. So, Jeff, do you want to take us away?
Well, first off, we're going to look at a clip we call Watch and React. It's from the movie Baby Boomer. And I think this was 1987, but there's a lot of things that have kind of entered our culture in the last 50 years, specifically starting in early 1970s. So we're going to take a look at this, and we're going to react to it and talk about it a bit. And then I'll follow up a little bit more with a talk about marriage.
Sure. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. Let's do it. All right. Here we go.
I need the P&Ls on Atlantic Overseas. I also need the latest ZBBs and PBBs. And Robin, I want you to get me the CEO of IBC ASAP. Not really great with living things.
I think you are. Gonna make love?
Are you telling me that I inherited a baby from a cousin I hadn't seen since 1954? Your baby just barfed all over my boss. This is not my baby. I went to Yale and Harvard. I don't have children.
I can still count on you 7 days a week, 48 hours a day.
Of course. I mean, I'm not going to turn into Irma Bombeck. So why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
I will teach your daughter to properly respect a man.
Bon appetit. I just want to turn on the faucet to have water. I don't want to know where it's coming from. I am a tough, cold career woman who has absolutely nothing in common with a veterinarian from Hadleyville.
I like it.
I got to watch this movie.
It reminded me. I just saw a clip floating around Instagram the other day where I don't know why it reminded me of that. It's maybe not the best analogy, but the guy was like spanking his wife, and the kid goes, "Mommy," or says, "Daddy spanked you because he loves you," or something. And the woman was like kind of perked up. It was like completely obviously different error, but I don't know if that, for whatever reason, the way he just kind of grabbed her and pulled her in and was like, "Shut up, woman. Come here, give me a kiss."
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to unpack from this clip. Just grabbing a woman and kissing her, and she's in her mental space of, I'm a businesswoman, and all of a sudden it's like everything's out the window when she's kissed.
What's with the avocado mask by a man? Was this something that you North Americans did in the 70s? Because while you guys were doing that in the 70s, we in Africa, we were taming Africa, for goodness sake. We didn't have TV. What's with the avocado mask?
I haven't seen the movie, but I'm guessing this is like so this is 1987. This is the beginning of the feminization of men. So that's what I'm guessing from the movie. It's like they've switched roles. She's now the breadwinner that's bringing it all home and in charge of life, and he's the more effeminate male that's going to stay at home and all this kind of nonsense.
Why did you choose this? Why did you choose this clip, Jeff? I'm curious.
Well, it's going to lead into what I'm talking about marriage and roles, specifically roles, and what the church is not teaching. I love the woman wrapped up there in her Muslim garb. And what does she say? She says, "I will teach him how to be a man," or something to this respect, right?
Mm-hmm.
The funny thing is, I've been out the last couple of days. I've been out different places. I was into a halal place. I got some shawarma the other day, and a couple of different beautiful girls, not wrapped in the complete burqas, but they had the head wrappings and wrapped it a little bit. One girl, darker skin, just incredible blue eyes, but each of them just very warm people with smiles. It was so much different than culturally than what I'm seeing from kind of wandering around in public with American women.
I think there is nothing more intriguing to a man than observing a reserved woman trying to hide and to hide a lot of her modesty. Not to the extreme that what the Muslims are going with. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about just hiding some of that modesty, some of that beauty. Just a little bit of gives a man a bit of an adventure to really unwrap and see what the depth is of her beauty. And that is what I want to mention is depth is it's not just on the face, but that depth really goes right deep into her heart.
You said unwrap. That was interesting. Choice of words. No, but it's true. It really is. Leave something to mystery, right? Leave something to the imagination a little bit. We used to have a saying when I was in the nightclub business. It was the more they pay, the longer they stay. And basically it referred to the fact that if you didn't charge people a cover, they would come in and look around and they would walk out and go to the next place.
It's fascinating that you mentioned that, Rob, because I want to add to what you just said and together what I just said before you mentioned something, and this is part of a woman's psychology. And I finished my book about 4 weeks ago, where I talk about dating and the whole thing about woman, and this is how you should approach women is it's you peeling away the layers like an onion to get to the core of who she is. And if you go too fast, it's a mess. If you go too slow, you're not getting anywhere. It's that rhythm that you need to develop with experience and time, but really peeling away those. And that's part of maintaining her interest, maintaining her engagement to you, and you staying responsible to get to the heart of what a woman really is.
We can't talk enough about culture because the cultures are so different, whether it's a religious culture or whether it's a culture from a country. Aubrey, I go swing dancing every Thursday night, and there's 300 or 400 people that show up. And for over a couple hours, you likely have gotten to talk for a few minutes and dance with about 10, 12 different women. I met a woman from South Africa, and she was, maybe 30 something, and she was just charming and completely different persona in terms of politeness and just approachability. I think that's why a lot of us go overseas.
Well, I must tell you, I will obviously have an internal bias towards my kinswoman. I think they're some of the most beautiful, intelligent, and magnificent women on this planet. But I can tell you one thing: the woman from Southern Africa, especially South Africa, very refined, high expectations. Some a little maybe too high, but well refined, approachable, and extremely strong. Sometimes a little belligerent, but not to the extent of North American women. There are some beautiful North American women, but there is definitely a difference in cultural approach. And I think that we can learn from each other. We can definitely learn from each other.
Yeah.
Well, I think we could set up a relationship cage fight between South African women, Korean women, and Israeli. I've heard that they are tough cookies.
Yeah, that'll be quite the fight. I can tell you that.
I think there's good women in every culture. I don't think the West lends to producing good women. Maybe it's just the culture, prosperity. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but I do know I've dated a lot of good women in my life, and I feel like even a girl that is rebellious, or I don't know if that's the right word, but if she's with the right man, like even that guy, like if you notice in that clip, she was like, giving him all this crap, and then he just grabs her, pulls her in, and kisses her because he had frame, right? And she probably loved it. So like even a woman that's headstrong, rebellious, a lot of times if she gets into the relationship with the right man, he will be able to tame some of that.
You will see, and it comes back to your interview you had with Dr. Killian last week. Is one of the key things is, and she said it during that interview. She said, "Listen, I don't submit to any man, only to the one that I have that took me as his wife." She said, "That's the only man I submit to," and that's a real sign of a strong woman right there. She says, "This is it. I'm going to compete as hard as any person on this planet." But that one man, that's the one that's going to lead, protect, and govern me. And the time when I'm with him, I get to take a break from having to be a strong woman. I can be part of what I've always wanted to be: beauty, soft, and feminine.
Yeah. Yep. They don't want to drive, but they will if they have to. But then they'll resent you for making them drive. Is the way I've found it. No, they will. They'll resent you eventually, and if you let them lead. They don't want it. They don't want the position, and nor should they have it. They should be able to sit back, relax, and enjoy the view. And of course, they bring a lot of value to a man, as Aubrey points out all the time. But they shouldn't be the one, driving the car. And
the right woman brings value. The wrong one will diminish you. That's why you should take care in which woman you make part of your life. Welcome, Ryan. Glad to see you join us.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I lost the internet, I guess. I mean, I could see everything, hear everything, and then I don't know. It was weird.
We thought you got raptured.
Yeah, I'm back.
Uh-oh.
I was kicked back out.
Rob, what are you trying to say, that we're staying behind here?
We're left behind. Yeah, man. I'd love to talk about, I don't know, Jeff, which direction you want to take this conversation, but I have some things that Ryan and I were going to talk about on a live. Some of the guys that we've had recently come across our path that were interested in the coaching program and some of the situations that we've been presented with. If we get time, I'd love to bring that up. I don't know if now's the right time or not.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, you're on the show timer there, so you just let me know. But I think I've got about 12 or 13 minutes here, and we can kind of get into discussion after it here.
Sure.
So I kind of want to start out with some rhetorical questions. I go back I go back about 40 years in my faith here. When we're coming to Christ, we're baby Christians. There's a lot of things that we put on the back burners. And there's so many questions that we just can't have answered all simultaneously all at once. So as I've matured as a Christian, there are some questions that have always plagued me that I wanted to get to the bottom of. And some of them have taken longer and longer to get there. Sometimes you find, and Aubrey will appreciate this, sometimes you have a preponderance of evidence, and yet for some reason it's still hard to overcome because you're used to thinking of something in a certain way. For instance, maybe you might think somebody is guilty of something and are absolutely convinced about it, but yet all the evidence shows that they are not. So this is kind of the internal monologue and dialogue I've had with myself. Dialogue because, you get the back and forth conversations going on. So let me jump in. These rhetorical questions: is marriage still relevant? Why do Christian parents put their daughters on a track to compete with men instead of placing equal importance in teaching them how to raise children and take care of a husband? Shouldn't the church be discussing this? So what is the purpose of marriage? So I'm going to cover biblical truths that have kind of been absent from church teachings for years now. And to premise this, we've been warned in the Bible, and Rob, if you have this card ready, you can throw it up here as well. But this is from 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1, which a lot of people are talking about today. We need to really take this to heart, because here we are 1,000 years later, and a lot of Christians are just reading the last 23.7% of the Bible, which we call the New Testament, and not really looking at things in context. So this is from the Classic Amplified Version, but the Holy Spirit distinctly and expressly declares that in later times, some will turn away from the faith, giving attention to deluding and seducing spirits and doctrines that demons teach. Through the hypocrisy and pretensions of liars, those consciences are seared, they're cauterized, who forbid to marry and teach them to abstain from certain foods of which God created to be received with thanksgiving by those who believe and have an increasingly clear knowledge of the truth. So the takeaway here from this, from this discussion, is that demons focus on getting the faithful confused and turned around, and that marriage will be attacked. For instance, not long after the Catholic Church became established around 1380 AD, priests who would marry up to 3 wives simultaneously were suddenly forbidden to marry. So here we are, thousands of years later. What else has crept into our understanding of God's design of our relationship? Lots of things. What I was taught was not adding up. I remember maybe I was, 8 or 9 years old, maybe 10. I remember I heard a priest on a TV talk show, a Catholic priest, I believe he was, boldly claiming that there was no requirement for vows or ceremony or a minister to authenticate a marriage to make it legit. And the audience, they kind of scoffed at it. And he pointed out that Adam and Eve didn't make a vow. But I was thinking, what could make him so sure to make a claim that went against all of what Christianity had impressed upon us? So I spent decades looking for this answer. And today it's become a lot easier, of course, because we have online references. We can go to the Greek, the Hebrew, and just look at instantly through something like Bible Gateway and just instantly look at and compare all the translations and do word searches and all these things. So I'm back at this question. What does God consider a legitimate marriage? Are vows required? Is a priest or a minister required to officiate a ceremony? Is living together without these steps a sin? Or does God regard the situation as these kind of situations as marriage by default? And more worrisome question was, why do Christians believe that they need permission for the government? We got to go get a license to get married. A license, that's permission to get married. Even during the 1980s, blood tests were still required before you could get a license, get a permission from the government to get married. So within the last 15 or 20 years, the buzz phrase, one man, one woman, started to get tossed around, as did the blanket statement premarital sex that didn't really have any kind of context to it. These all just became these catchphrases. They became traditions that were just off of our tongues so easily. So what does God's word say about these things? And Rob, I'm going to go into the first graphic card, or actually the second graphic card here. But
you did find the first one.
Yeah, well, that's the first one. And so we're on 2 Timothy 3:16. There we go. All scripture is God-breathed, given by divine inspiration, and is profitable for instruction, for conviction of sin, for correction and errors of restoration through obedience, for training in righteousness, learning to live in conformity to God's will, both publicly and privately, behaving honorably with personal integrity and moral courage. And that's the Classic Amplified again. So our 66 books in the Bible didn't exist at that time when this was written. So what scriptures is he referencing then? Paul is talking to Timothy here and kind of helping Timothy direct in his ministry. So it's talking about what the laws given through God were, through Moses, the Mosaic laws. There's 613 of them. Some exclusively for Levite priests of the time, some of them for the Israelites. They are a comprehensively defined sin, outlining morals, civil codes, and ceremonial guidelines. So there's a lot to unpack there. But some of that we can see in the 10 Commandments very easily. Do not murder. Do not bear false witness. Do not desire to take your neighbor's wife or any of his property for that matter, etc. So in this next card, we look at what is the purpose then? Therefore, a man shall leave his father and his mother and shall become united and cleave to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And that's Genesis chapter 2, verse 24 in the Classic Amplified. Now, there's a couple different ways to approach this. I've heard both arguments. Some argue that this exclusively means that a man and a woman become a single biological entity. Others will point out that the reference of the father and the mother is stating that the one flesh is talking about the creation of a baby. So God does direct mankind to be fruitful and multiply. But if Genesis chapter 2, verse 4 is not referencing this, then does marriage have a purpose? In other words, is marriage nothing more than a status? To find the answer to this, we're going to need to look at Deuteronomy 22, also part of the Mosaic laws, starting in verse 13 of the Classic Amplified. If any man takes a wife and goes into her and then scorns her and charges her with shameful things and gives her an evil reputation and says, I took this woman, but then I came into her and it did not find her to have tokens of her virginity, meaning she was no longer a virgin. Then the father of the young woman and her mother shall get and bring out the tokens of her virginity to the elders of the city of the gate. That's pretty crazy considering how we think about things today. Just bringing out the presentation of virginity. Was that important? So as I continue here. And her father shall say to the elders, I gave my daughter to this man as wife, but he hates and spurns her. And behold, he has made shameful charges against her, saying, I found not in your daughter the evidence of her virginity, and yet these are the tokens of my daughter's virginity, and they shall spread the garments before the elders of the city. Goes on to say, and the elders of that city shall take the man and rebuke and whip him, and they shall fine him 100 shekels of silver, and give them to the father of the young woman, because he has brought an evil name upon a virgin of Israel, and she shall be his wife, and he may not divorce her all of his days. But if it is true that the evidence of the virginity, her virginity, were not found in the young woman, then they shall bring her to the door of her father's house and the men of the city shall stone her to death, because she has wrought criminal folly in Israel by playing the harlot in her father's house. So you shall put away the evil from among you. So in these verses, the status of a woman is for her to be married according to God's law. There's an emphasis on her virginity, to be a virgin living in her father's house. Now, the Mosaic laws are silent about a woman who are no longer women who are no longer virgins in the context of having this discussion of marriage. In 1 Corinthians, and I don't have a card for that, 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 36 and 38, even goes as far to state that if a father wants to keep his daughter and not marry her off, it's his prerogative to keep her at home. So obviously, we're looking at things a lot differently today in our culture. Before we discuss that, though, let's dispel this idea of male virgins invented in the 20th century by the church. God didn't make men that way. We don't have hymens. Sorry, some of you churches out there, that's just not the case. So why then is her virginity such an issue in regards to marriage? So all through the scriptures, we see that the first fruits are sacred. There's something very, very special to God about this. It holds significant spiritual, cultural, and symbolic importance across several areas. And I'll go through some of these here, and I can put them in the show notes later on. So one of them is special inheritance rights. The firstborn son traditionally held the right to a double portion of the inheritance. That's in Deuteronomy 21:17. This signified his leadership role within the family and the responsibility for its continuity or its continuality. This birthright often includes both material wealth and familial authority. The second one is dedication to God. According to the law of Moses, the firstborn of both humans and animals were considered holy to the Lord, and they were to be dedicated to him, as it shows in Exodus 13, verse 2, and Numbers chapter 3, verse 13. For animals, the firstborn of a clean animal was sacrificed, while the firstborn of humans was redeemed, often with monetary offerings, things like that, signifying belonging to God. And that's in Exodus 13, verses 13 through 15. Then there's the role in covenants and blessings. The firstborn often symbolizes God's favor or fulfillment of promises. Isaac, as Abraham's firstborn through Sarah, was the first child of the covenant, as it shows there in Genesis chapter 17. Jacob, though technically not the firstborn, received the firstborn's blessings from Isaac, underscoring that God's sovereignty is choosing who would carry his promises. And that's shown there in Genesis 27. Then, regarding the importance of the firstborn, we have the representation of Israel. Israel is called God's firstborn nation, as it says in Exodus chapter 4. This reflects their unique role as the chosen people to bring God's revelation and blessings to this world. And a couple more here. We can look at the plagues of Israel. In the final plague against Egypt, God struck down the firstborn, not all the children, the firstborn of Egypt, as a demonstration of his power, because they were, even the Egyptians and their firstborn were sacred to God. And he did this as a demonstration of his power. That's in Exodus 12. The Israelites were spared when they obeyed God's command to mark their doors with lamb's blood. Of course, and this is what we know as the Passover. And the final one of this is the foreshadowing of Christ. The firstborn's importance ultimately foreshadows Jesus Christ, who is referred to as the firstborn over all creation. That's in Colossians, in the first chapter, highlighting his preeminence and his authority. He's the firstborn among many brothers, as it says in Romans 8, indicating his role is the first to rise in the resurrection, leading believers in eternal life. So let's remember that in ancient history, it condemns certain condemnations didn't exist. If you had sex, you likely were going to have, excuse me, my show notes are bad here. Let's remember in verse 13 that we didn't have condoms, okay? Prophylactics, condoms, not condemns, condoms, okay? We didn't have those way back when. Those are kind of a modern invention. So if you had sex, you were likely going to have a baby. So how does God direct the response of a virgin living in her father's house that has had sex outside of marriage? And this is in Deuteronomy 22, starting in verse 28. We have a card for that as well. It says, if a man finds a girl who is a virgin. Was there a question there?
No, I clicked the wrong card. Go ahead.
Okay. If there is a man that finds a girl who is a virgin, who is not betrothed, that means engaged, and he seizes her and lies with her, and they are found, then the man who lie with her shall give the girl's father 50 shekels of silver, and she shall be his wife, because he has violated her and may not divorce her all of his days. Now, let me head off some people here at the pass. A lot of people out there that don't like what God's word has to say. They'll try to use this as an endorsement of rape. This is not what it is, and there's two reasons here. The first reason is verse 28 indicates that they are found, which was different from the previous passages. They are not. They're both trying to conceal this. And to make it clear, in the second reason it's not rape in Deuteronomy, and I'll get back on track here in a second. In Deuteronomy 22, verse 25, gives us an example of rape. And it says in verse 25, but if a man finds the betrothed maiden in the open country, and the man seizes her and lies with her, and then only the man who lie with her shall die. But you shall not do nothing to the young woman. She has committed no sin punishable by death, for this is when a man attacks and slays his neighbor. It's the same kind of thing is what it's saying. For he came upon her in the open country and betrothed the girl that cried out. The engaged girl cried out for help, but there was no one to save her. So we see that when a man seizes a woman and they consensually lie together and have sex, in the one passage, it's not rape. In this particular case of what I just read, it is. So my next question after having read this was, well, where is the requirement for a non-virgin to get married? Again, remember the context is the purpose of marriage here. The answer is that there is no such requirement in God's law specifically addressing the status of a non-virgin woman living outside of her father's care to be married for sex. And this took me years to just like, that can't be right. That can't be right. That can't be right. I've just got to keep digging at this, but I could not find that in the 613 laws given of God. Now, I realize this is a inflammatory statement for many people that have been taught to repeat these kind of phrases like one man, woman, premarital sex, with just kind of a blanket statement outside the context of scriptures. Instantly, we'll leap to something like 1 Corinthians 6, citing fornication, sexual morality, ignoring the directive in that we read at the beginning in 2 Timothy to use the scriptures, being things like the Mosaic Law, for the context of being what is good for reproof and correction. And we'll certainly address this in greater 1 Corinthians 6 in greater details in a future podcast. There's a lot going there to unpack that. As long as I've been going to church, I've never heard any minister, any preacher, any teacher putting it in context. Only lately are people beginning to see the light here. So we kind of have modern day Pharisees that have come along and taught us. They've added to the 613 laws given through Moses by God. So there's there's the leap then in 1 Corinthians verse 16. Why is he talking about the temple? why is this the only place in the Scripture in the New Testament, other than Christ talking about himself, comparing himself to the temple, Herod's temple, sitting there on the mount? Why is it the only place that the temples are talked about? So I'm going to let that rest. We'll come back to that in a future episode and get deeper into that. So if you want to study all of the regulations that God gives about sex, they're very clearly listed there. And you're going to be surprised by some of the things that you don't see. But you look into Leviticus 18, Leviticus 20, Deuteronomy 22, and as I've just read there, and just read down the list of what God says. Again, the emphasis is on virgins being in their father's house. The purpose, as we're told from the very beginning, that the two shall become one, to be fruitful and multiply. So, and it says this here in Malachi. This is our last card, and I'm going to wrap it up here. In Malachi chapter 2, verse 15, again from the Classic Amplified, and did not God make you and your wife one flesh? Did not one make you and preserve your spirit alive? And why did God make you two one? Because he sought a godly offspring from your union. Now, interesting here, offspring doesn't quite get to the heart of it in our English. What it actually says in Hebrew is the word zerah, which is not about the fruit, but it's more about the seed, producing more seed, and kind of the idea of that we're going to multiply. It's not just going to be a different kind of thing. God wants to go forth in the union of marriage, for the purpose of marriage, to multiply and be fruitful. There we go. I'm going to take a drink.
All right. Does anybody want to chime in? I don't know where to start. I'll be honest. There was a lot of information and there was a lot of questions asked. I just don't know which ones we should start to tackle first. And
well, let's go back to the original. The question is, what is the point of getting married? And now, I mean, we just it is clear, and the Bible is very clear that it is about the zerah, the continuity of the seed. We see this in levirate marriages, that you want to see the levirate, that you want to see the seed continue, and that houses are established. But if you look at Genesis 2:24, the whole case regarding Genesis 2:24, that it is an what we call in academics or in law the locus classicus, or the classical point of standing for marriage, it's simply not true. What it actually talks about there is the establishing of a house. And I think here, if you go with regards to the establishment of a house, the man will leave his father's house. That's the first thing. He will leave his father's house. So he will step out from his father's house and he'll create his new house, and he'll cleave onto his wife. That is typical, just reference to that is euphemism for sexual intercourse. Yes, we get the academics that will argue that children are the one flesh that's created, but it's euphemism for sex. Let's be honest. At the end of the day, and the Hebrew reflects that. But what I just want to mention, this is in the summary, is that this all once again supports through Malachi, through Deuteronomy 21, the establishing of a man's house. And you cannot establish a man's house without a woman. You cannot. It is not until you establish until you take a woman for your own and she becomes yours, you are still under your father's house. Now, yes, we do have the situation where you're still under the patriarch's house. We understand it, but your house is established that is unique and separate from your father's.
so guys that are abstinent, or celibate, whatever, they don't have a house, so to speak. I mean, even though they could go out, start a business, do all kinds of things, but if they don't get married or, well, whatever, lay with a woman, they don't have a house.
According to the state, you have an estate, but within the spiritual, within biblical norms, no, you don't have a house. You're still under your father's house.
It's like a line, basically. Like, is that what you're saying? Like a line of descendants, a house. Okay, all right, just making sure I'm tracking.
Yep, and you'll see it's Jacob, the house of Ibrahim, the house of Isaac, the house of Jacob. All of those are houses established, but they're established with the assistance of having a woman. You cannot achieve it without a woman, and that's why my mind's blown by what you see. If secular women look at some of the religious men, and they say, you guys look down upon women. It's impossible. We cannot even establish a house without a woman. How does that in any way diminish a woman's value? She's the vessel on how I establish and expand my house, and she is part of it.
And isn't one of the parallels here we're drawing is that of a true biblical marriage and that of the worldly marriage? Is that something that you're after here, Jeff?
Well, I mean, it didn't really become apparent to me later in life. I haven't given much thought to it. And I'm my father was an only child. I'm an only child. I don't have kids of my own. And this late in life, I'm asking God. It's like, hey, don't let it die out, because I know this is something important to you, and it should be important to me as well.
Yeah, that's true. I see Dr. Gina Murray always love having her chime in. She made comments here. It might help to understand that there was no economy for a sexually active but unmarried woman in those days, except harlotry. She was presumably a harlot with the status in society. Now, I would love to discuss harlotry and prostitution with her, because the Bible does make a delineation and distinction between those two. And I do believe that the Bible is erroneously translated when it comes to harlotry and prostitution. If I understand the Hebrew here, harlotry was clearly translated from those temple prostitutes, women that did worship in temples, and they were paid and looked after for doing so, the Vestal virgins eventually. And then prostitution were women that were destitute, that resorted to prostitution to actually survive. But yes, coming back to her comment, there was no economy for a girl under her father's care to make a survival, because, and this is, I think, what Dr. Murray really points here out is this: she's already under her father's care. She probably is fed, clothed, looked after, and she resorts to sexual practices with men that aren't her husband. And what she's doing is she's giving herself sex. She's not falling under under their leadership. She's not even following the leadership of her father. She needs, and she needs nothing, and she still resorts to the sexual freedom. I mean, that is just absolutely ludicrous to think about that. This is not a woman.
That's the same thing today, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, exactly.
How many college girls are out there right now, and the father or the family is paying for their tuition and their rentals and everything, and they're on there only doing OnlyFans every night and rolling in hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. It's the same thing.
It's a sexual licentiousness of its highest order. It's incomplete. This is a young woman out of control, and this is the young woman that leads men astray. That's what Proverbs really warns us about. It leads men astray from their purpose. And what does she do? She gets self-gratification out of this.
Who's to blame, though, right? It's the men. It's the fathers.
Well, I think everybody's got to be blamed here.
Right. Yeah. But the fathers, I mean, the thing is that Christian men are so like, we're just taught wrong, right? Because sending our daughter to college is kind of normal. So, but you send them off to the wolves and they become a whore, maybe not a paid whore. Maybe they're not on OnlyFans, but they're going to get ran through by several guys in college. And that's just normal to us. Like, no, dude, your job as a dad is to protect her purity. Like, that's got to be one of your main responsibilities if you have a daughter, is to get her to the wedding, to the altar as a virgin. But they're not being told that, right? So we're leaving them very unprotected. And I know firsthand, I mean, I was in the nightclubs. Young women are naive. They're, they're not that, I mean, with a little bit of status and money and, it ain't hard to have sex with them. So like, but there's no dad around to protect them to say, no, like, you can't stay out that late. You can't go out with that guy. Like, I don't have to talk to many of the girls' fathers. I don't think hardly ever in my life to take them out on a date. That's what it needs to get back to, as old fashioned as that sounds, is going to the father and being like, and I did that with my current wife. I went to her dad and I said, I'm in love with your daughter. She's in love with me. And I want to marry her. And I want to ask for your permission to marry her. And I didn't ask until he gave it to me. But yeah, I think we need to return to the old ways, man.
Absolutely. I think we see a shift in power, when the girl turns 18, immediately she finds herself in the matriarchy that it rules the world today, the spirit of Ashtaroth, right? The Ashtaroth worship. And this system is destructive to the family unit. And the fathers are left with no choice. It's the system that they are employed by or actually serve.
You know what? I want to add to this, but I think this comes down, and as a person that I'm very proud of my Boer heritage, my Boer culture, and I think when I look at you three Americans sitting there, you have an American culture, and the American culture is really was established with such a range of different European cultures, later with African cultures, and all of these different cultures, Hispanic cultures, and over time really became the mouth part of what constitutes American culture today. But if I look at my own Boer culture, one of the key things of my Boer culture, which is traditionally anthropologically established, is through bloodlines. We see a clear amount of unified or similar peoples that established this culture and then expanded on it over time. And so the woman, for instance, as a Boer women are such a valuable woman to me, because I understand that if I have a child with a Boer woman, she's going to raise my children in accordance with Boer traditions. And I also know that Boer men carry the seed and legacy of those men that came before them. And so I mention this because we see this similar to Israel back then. We have today, what we have, Boer men and Boer women are the only ones that can actually perpetuate Boer culture. That is the parents that will generate the next generation. And so if a man, this is why I'm saying, in these larger Western cultures, we see fathers that simply don't care about their daughters because, you know what? She's just another one. She is just another woman on there. And that breaks my heart because you don't understand legacy. Legacy is of such importance. You have to have if you put more emphasis on your sons that carry the seed, the bloodline, then you'll know the bloodline will continue with them. If you have a daughter that you're proud of, you have a daughter of Zion that will continue this bloodline. But I do not see that value. I don't see people with the same passion for the bloodlines. I don't see that. And then I see this will eventually, like the Romans and every other large culture out there, will eventually come to an end.
I just want to give a shout out to Gina Murray also. Gina, I've heard great things about your books. I haven't read them myself yet, but I'd love to have you on the podcast if you're open to that. Send us an email or you can, Rob@robbkowalski.com is the email address, and would love to bring you on the show. We got a comment here from Achi Manolo. I'm not probably butchered your name. Even a lot of fathers today teach their daughters that they don't need a man. Many fathers teach feminism today by default. That's true. Completely true.
I'm go ahead, Ryan.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that also speaks to what I mentioned earlier. I mean, of the system that we find ourselves in, which is looking more each day like the final beast system.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's when you see all the different points coming away from or coming towards the same thing. This is a coordinated attack. I mean, the church is not teaching this anymore. I've just heard sermon after sermon about how men need to step up, and the daughters are never addressed at all. Is there a mother out there that teaches her daughter how to take care of a man? I don't think they exist.
So they're definitely few and far between. I had an interesting thought the other day. There's a girlfriend of mine, girl I've been friends with a long time, Christian girl. She's got several kids. She's single, and she's been dating this guy, this like DJ in Baltimore. And DJs are out all late. They're in the bars late all night. Probably not the best guy. I don't really know the guy. But I asked her, I said, how's it going with such and such? And she said, this was like a couple months ago. She said, we're just keeping each other company. Basically, they're both kind of lonely. I don't think they're in love, but they're just kind of, get along well enough, and they're bored. So they hang out and they probably sleep together. I mean, they've been, dating for 6 months or longer. And I was just kind of thinking the other day, like the difference in the way the world does it. Cause I was like, she came to my New Year's Eve party the other night, and she left and said, I'm going to go see, such and such. So I was like, I realized she was still dating the guy after telling me that they were just keeping each other company. And I thought, she might get the relationship, because this is what happens. People start dating, hooking up, months go by, and then they drift into a relationship because you start getting a little jealous of, because if you're sleeping with somebody, just naturally feelings of ownership are going to happen at some point, and you just kind of drift into a relationship that's not that great over time. So I was thinking, she may end up in the relationship with this guy, but I was like, think about how different that is versus like sleeping together for months and then drifting into a half-ass relationship versus, no, you sleep with her, you're married. Damn. Like right from the moment that we have sex, I'm married to her. That's the difference. Not like, oh, let's just try it, take it for a test drive, kick the tires for a couple months, and maybe we just keep like, no, dude. I mean, that's how it should be. And that's how monogamy only screws women, because it would be so much easier for a man to say yes to get married, even at a young age, if he knew he wasn't limited to one for his whole life. That's a huge decision for a man to make. So we just go, we don't do it. We just wait, and we sleep with girls while we wait for the one to come along, and we just break hearts and make it harder for them to pair bond later when they do find their man. It's a disaster.
Rob, you and I spoke for just a moment. We were talking about this playing, how words are being twisted again. We come to think of it as, the women are all complaining about a lack of commitment from men. No, they're wanting exclusivity. There's a difference there.
Huge difference.
I think one of the key things here that changed was a game changer for the way we see unions that exist between men and women, what we commonly today refer to as marriages, is contraception. When we took away the result of sexual intercourse, in other words, when that children will be produced from sexual intercourse, we suddenly saw a complete dilution of what the value is of marriage and unions. Now, I always say this to women is that, listen here, if you're gonna get impregnated by a man, carry that child for term 9 months, give birth in pain, and that man, or the genetics of that man was not worth going through all that trouble. Your pain only starts from day one after you delivered. because you'll need to look in that child's face that will never probably reach potential. Now, God forbid, I don't say that for everyone. There's people that raise throughout the challenges. But I'm saying, wouldn't it be better off if that you chose a man that actually has good genetic material to carry that man's seed to full term, give birth in pain, but see how the potential that child actually has, just if that child just fulfills in it. We seriously, guys, we do not take we animals, for goodness sake, they take more value and pride in the genetic material, and we're supposed to be the smart ones on this planet.
That's a good point.
Yeah, another destructive measure, the power of the seed being destroyed.
Well, removing the possible consequences from the act, right, is what you're saying, because with the, abortion so readily available and contraception, it's like, yeah, it definitely only encourages promiscuity. But I'd love to hear, I mean, Aubrey, you talk about the DNA stuff and the genetic things that happen with women, and I know a little bit. I mean, I know. You ever heard of the term alpha widowed? When a girl dates an alpha and then he leaves her, and then she goes off and marries a guy that's less, whatever. But he impressed upon her, like a woman when she sleeps with a man, usually the first man, maybe the second. It's like stepping in wet concrete. It's like you're going to leave your imprint on that girl, and she's not going to forget it. Now, you even talked about it goes as far as it actually your DNA gets in her body. And I think this is proven scientifically, but it can even get passed on to the kids, where the kids kind of look like the guy that slept with her before the father. Isn't that correct?
Well, yes. Well, now we're getting into the fields of microchimerism. Microchimerism is a very radioactive topic within genetics at this present moment. I mean, geneticists are fist fighting over this term, but microchimerism has been documented in animal husbandry in English societies for about 800 years. We see this with a lot of sheep breedings, especially in South Africa, and definitely we see this. And for our listeners, don't just Google this topic and just take the first answer you get, because it is way more complex than this. You need to study upon study. We've got several studies that I've studied upon this. It is an amazing field but there is definitely genetic residue that left in a woman. But one of the interesting things here is, Rob, when you talk about alpha, is it alpha widow? Is that what you mentioned?
Alpha widowed, yeah. Widowed.
It's interesting that you brought that up. I know this more because especially the Romans and the English later on with their conquest doctrine of prima nocta, which means first night, where the lords will take the right to have sexual access to a bride on her wedding night, with the hopes that they will breed out. They did this with Scots especially, where they would breed them out to breed the Scots out. Now, that in itself is very much similar to what these Romans and English did in their doctrine of prima nocta. But definitely the DNA, and that's why, once again, the care that a man has to take for just taking a girl that was promiscuous previously, to take her in, you're taking in the good old term of damaged goods. It is such a terrible term, but it is so descriptive. It is truly what it is, that you take in a girl that is damaged goods, and you have to take care for something that she gave away freely previously, but now you have to share the DNA that she's been tainted with, and have to take possibility and take responsibility to care for any offspring that would be generated thereafter.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I want to share a story. My first time having sex with a girl, I was a teenager. We were on a dark country road in the back seat, and I just expected it was just going to be kissing and hugging. And before I knew it, her clothes were coming off. And a couple days, I don't know what the time frame was, but I found out that she wasn't a virgin. And this is my first girl, and I was devastated. I mean, I literally sobbed when I found this out. There was some sort of bond there that I just every fiber of my being knew that there was something going on here with your first. So, when people are into their 15th or their 200th, it's not like the woman that you're expecting you're going to have a baby with.
Do you guys think it's the same though? Because I don't think it's the same. I think women bond during sex. I actually had Dawn Masler on my podcast, and she talks about the oxytocin release, and that's for women. It's when they orgasm, but for men, it's when we commit. Right. It's when we commit. I know from my own life, I would have sex. Not even from the first girl I had sex with that I feel much of anything after.
I believe that
lower interest, except the lower desire to do it again with them. That was about it.
Yeah, I believe that there is a detection, a spiritual detection that takes place because it's a covenant. A marriage covenant takes place in a consummation, and I believe that a defilement occurs when that woman brings in that DNA baggage to that covenant bed. So I personally believe that there's a spiritual issue right. And maybe that's what Jeff felt.
It could be. I'm not as spiritually sensitive as Ryan, but I can tell you one thing: not every woman that you have sex with is a marriage covenant. It should be. Don't get me wrong. I'm saying it should be, because we see the example of the prostitute, where Paul speaks about having sexual intercourse with a prostitute. That's not necessarily marriage there. It's a little bit more complex for our listeners there, but you shouldn't be having sexual intercourse with prostitutes in any ways.
Really?
Ryan, to stem on the back of what you said, it's just coming to mind that, in Scripture, we hear this phrase, the wife of your youth, of your youth. So there's something there.
Well, if that doesn't allude to more than one, I don't know what does.
Yeah, it's the first wife.
It's the first wife.
Right?
Yeah.
People's like, no, it doesn't mean that. It means just love the only one. I'm like the cord of three strands verse they try to say, oh, it's God. Like, you really got to stretch to believe monogamy only, man. Really
I want to add some academics here to what Rob spoke earlier about the oxytocin being released during a woman's during orgasm. One thing in criminology, what you have is I did some family law back in South Africa, and one of the things we always, when we see these women that you represent, they have this bum guy that she has a relationship with, and man, she just keeps on going back to him. You were like wondering, and when I was young lawyer, I would think to myself, listen, you woman, you're not learning. You're keep on going back to these guys. And now we find that a lot of these criminal element gentlemen are very forceful during sex. And I'm not saying men should be forceful. You should agree, both you and the woman that you have sexual intercourse should agree to the terms, at least when you have intercourse with her. It should be under consent before we get this YouTube video taken off. But what I want to say is that that these men are so forceful and aggressive that because of this, the woman achieve an orgasm so much faster. And so what now happens is, because that oxytocin being released, she bonds, like Rob said earlier, with this man. And that's why even if he's harmful to her and to the relationship in what he does in his maltreatment of her, she just keeps on going back to him. And so that's why that is such a key part of the sexuality that exists between a man and a woman. We cannot deny it.
Yeah, that's why in like rape cases and abduction cases, there's Stockholm syndrome, right? I mean, that's another example of that.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, there's actually a biological, there's a part of your brain. Is it the amygdala? Whatever the one is that gives you like the warning system, the red flags that shows you, like, that actually shuts down on a woman's brain after sex. It literally does. Like, so this is why women, they'll stay in the relationship longer, and they'll just, I've done terrible things to women, not terrible, but I just meant like they just put up with some really bad behavior on my part after we had sex, and they lose. That's just why my whole platform before I started talking about biblical marriage was on purity, because I told women, you're going to give away a lot of your power. You wield a lot of control before sex, but once you have sex, you're giving that man a lot of, and you don't know that man. He might have told you that he loves you and he's going to be around, but did he step up and prove it? Did he actually, put a ring on it? Not just put a ring on it. Did he marry you? Because then he's backing up his words with action, and then maybe he's worthy of the trust. But if you have sex with him early, you're just putting your heart in someone's hands who you have no idea what they're going to do with it.
I've coached so many unmarried girls in my life. And you're right, it's the amygdala, which is a small almond-shaped region in the limbic system that detects threats and initiates the body survival response. And so you're 100% right with that, Rob. But one thing that I've said this, and for the fathers out there listening, and for the mothers that don't teach your daughters this, because I don't know why mothers don't teach this to their daughters. Do not make important, life-changing, or relationship decisions when you're ovulating, because your security measures are already lessened. Now, we send girls, first of all, they go out to the club. Okay, she's ovulating. She's with her girlfriends. She's taking in substance like alcohol. So now her defensive mechanisms are dropping.
Yep.
Then she's the one that sees all these friends of hers are hooking up with some of these guys, and she doesn't want to be the one that's ridiculed in the next day. Remember, she's ovulating, and now what happens? Sexual intercourse that evening, because all her security measures are gone.
Yep.
And so it blows my mind that nobody talks about this. Seriously, it blows my mind. We don't hear psychologists talk about this. We don't hear doctors talk about this. We don't hear mothers, because some mothers just simply do not even think about this, because for the whole of their life, they haven't even realized that their security measures during ovulating is lower. Yeah. So now
let's devote a show to it.
What's that?
Let's devote a show to it.
We can do that. Maybe we can get somebody that's more knowledgeable on the matter than I. But I can tell you now, it blows my mind. Nobody talks about this. One little stupid lawyer from South Africa starting to raise this issue. Do not make important life-changing decisions during your ovulation.
Yeah, and I would add, while you're on birth control. I mean, there's studies out there as well that shows that women choose men that are of lesser value, lower value.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because the receptors of birth control and the increase of estrogen to your brain shuts off the woman's natural ability to identify a man that is akin to her, that would be the ideal man to pair bond with. It's fascinating if you look at those studies. But you're right. We can devote some time for that in the future.
Jeff, did you want to start to wrap it up? Because if not, I had another question on that topic.
They say in show business, always leave them wanting more. So let's leave. Let's write it down. Boy, I think we got some great subjects to cover. I think we've got a whole list of shows to do here. We will be bringing in experts on these things. Please continue to keep tuning in. Send us your questions in the chat. We want to follow up with it.
Yep. Leave a comment if you got any takeaways, if you have any suggestions for future episodes. This is we're kind of on a test run here to see if this is something that we want to continue. We're basically exploring, places that the church is getting it wrong, false teaching, false doctrines that are out there. And that's what we want to dive into. There's a lot of things that we'll talk about that I wish somebody would have told me sooner.
Yes.
So yeah, if you have any suggestions for topics, please drop them in the comments. Tune in next Monday, same time, 6 p.m. Eastern. And that's it.
Do we know what our subject's going to be next week?
It's actually Ryan. Ryan, do you know what we're going to be talking about? You're up.
Well, I have some ideas. I haven't settled on one yet. I could throw one out there right now if you want.
Please.
Sure. What do you got?
So I want to discuss patriarchy and how a man can achieve patriarchy and the matriarchy that we live in today by putting an item on the table.
Putting an item on the table.
Yeah, basically, his birthright of polygyny.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, that'll do it. That'll definitely
one of those subjects that it's not, I mean, it's not really been hit on that much.
Right.
And that's what sends, I mean, you brought that topic up earlier about some of the things we've been seeing in the coaching program. And, you know, I think this is the reason why. Once that gets put on the table, then the spirit of Ashtaroth is revealed in that marriage. And not only that, but the man learns that he has not been leading it, even though he may have believed it, that he has. So
that's something I heard very early on in this movement was, you know, you might think you're operating in a patriarchal household, but bring up polygyny and you'll really find out. It's true, man.
Well, guys, you are all gentlemen. You're all scholars. I am. This is a place of iron sharpening iron. We're all learning things here. We're all growing, and we're here because, like Rob said, we are just not getting that in church, and we haven't been getting it ever. So, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Rob,
see you guys next Monday night. Have a great week.